servant.
I thought it
1987.
was, sorry to interrupt, but I've heard that it was Sridhar Maharaj's favorite title of all the books.
Well, it may have been. He liked, but, all those titles, he thought about it. Like The Golden Volcano of Divine Love. I was there in India uh, when he leaned, forward in that big wooden massage chair and he said, um, lava, love. Because he liked to play with words. He was a poet in English and, you know, Sanskrit. And he said, is lava love? There must be some connection. There may be some connection there. Find it out. And then he started talking about how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the golden volcano of divine love. So that was a very favorite title of his. The Search for Sri Krishna, he really liked that. And that book was translated back into Bengali and then into Hindi and other Indian languages. And if you look at the Bengali translation, uh, maybe you don't read Bengali, but you can see, okay, there's the Bengali lipi, and suddenly the word search for Sri Krishna will spring out at you in English because you like to say that in English. So I don't know, it's hard for me to presume what someone's favorite was, but it's a great title, The Loving Search for the Lost Servant. I don't know if it's his favorite title. Where did you get that?
I don't know. Maybe Goswami Maharaj said it, or maybe
Yeah.
I just remember hearing years ago that Srila Guru Maharaj really liked that title. Like you said, he liked them all, of course, but you know, there is something special about it. And that was the last one, wasn't it? So,
No,
of the
no,
Devotion Press as well.
no. After that, we published the last book that we published of Srila Sridharmarsh was uh, the subjective evolution of
Oh,
consciousness.
yes, yes, yes.
You know, but by that time, Srila Sridharmarsh is very old. Anyways, with your kind permission, uh, we'll try to enter into the reading. So, if you give me a chance here, but I'm just saying. Thank you all for paying attention and listening and giving me the opportunity to do this. It's like I was going to say, this is something like a message in a bottle. You know, you put a message inside a bottle and throw it out there in the ocean. You don't know exactly where that's going to go. But so in a similar way, we published 3,000 copies of this book in 1987. And here I am 40 years later talking to an international group of friends and devotees and making a recording. We don't know who will listen to this. Um, I was astonished a few years back to receive an email from Goswami Maharaj. He'd seen me playing my ukulele on YouTube. And by that time, this was 14 years ago or so. I'd given up all hope of anybody ever paying attention to these books. And he told me, oh, come to Thailand. There's a big group out here. You'll meet a Russian Swami who's a big entrepreneur and has vegetarian restaurants in Russia. I said, really? Then found my way to Moscow a year later, where they were printing stacks and stacks of these books, and I gave lectures in Kiev, Ukraine, at a hotel there, at a yoga center they had, and I gave lectures in Petersburg and in Moscow. And when I left, they gave me a few books in Russian, and I found myself later flying home in the airport in Frankfurt, and somehow struck up a conversation with another traveler. Uh, and she said, well, yeah, what do you do? And I explained, well, I'm traveling and talking about yoga, and we have these books. And she said, oh, books? I need something to read on the plane. And I wound up distributing Sri Guru and His Grace 40 years after the fact to some German girl on the plane. And I couldn't believe that somehow this message is still going on. This message has legs. Some books you print and they're okay for a few months and maybe they get tossed in the waste bin or something. I used to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books in the airport. And today you can go into a used bookstore and you'll find a Srimad Bhagavatam there that may have been distributed by us in the airport. But I sometimes think, okay, who's really reading the teachings of Kapila Dev or the teachings of Dhruva Maharaj, in Sanskrit and with Roman transliteration in the Srimad Bhagavatam? I don't know. But I know that people are reading The Loving Search for the Lost Servant. So that's a lot of preamble for this morning. Um, we're talking about faith. So let me just call up I might have read this before, but it's worth repeating. Srila Sridhar says, Ocean of Faith. Although the object of our heart's faith is infinite, still some conceptions of him have been given by the men of experience in the ocean of faith. In the ocean of faith, many have had their special experience, and that has been recorded in the scriptures. Through that, we can approach the saints who stand like lighthouses to help us cross the ocean of nations. But that must be bona fide and not merely a concoction or an imitation. Faith is required in order to work in that substantial conscious world, which is subjective. And we talked about this a little bit last week. Um, Sri Ramash says, Shraddha, faith is more important than calculative truth. The example of great souls is more valuable to us than our human calculation. The external material physical truth does not have much value. Rather, it is a false attitude of mind, which is very strong. So, the idea of the association of saints, you know, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, becoming initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, the idea is to get beyond human calculation, to get beyond a false attitude of mind. So we're so addicted to this false attitude of mind. We think that everything is for our personal exploitation, that the world around us is made for our enjoyment. But this is a very mixed up conception. In fact, 1,000 years ago, uh, people had a different take on the world. They saw things differently. They didn't have so much faith in rational and human calculation. So Srila Sri Ramakrishna continues. He says, faith has no connection with the so-called reality of this world. It is completely independent. And it's interesting that he says the so-called reality of this world. I was watching, you can look it up on YouTube. I was watching a prominent physicist, a doctor, at a conference of physicists, and they asked her, do particles exist? And she spoke for 45 minutes, explaining that we're not really sure. We don't know if there's any such thing as an atom or a particle in any real sense. We have different kinds of mathematics which help us adapt to certain models, and we can create certain models of reality and then analyze those with mathematical formulas. But we're not sure to what extent we're dealing with anything concrete. And I thought, wow, this is this is exactly what Srila Sridhar Maharaj means when he says the so-called reality of this world. So we put so much faith in the so-called reality of this world, but there's a different kind of faith, which leads us to a higher world. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj says there's a world which is guided only by faith. Shraddhamayam lokam. Faith is everything there, and it is infinite and all accommodating. In the world of faith, everything may be true by the sweet will of the Lord. And here in the land of death, calculation is inconclusive and destructive in its ultimate goal. So this is a very powerful and fascinating statement by a great theologian, not only of the 20th century, but of all centuries. Um, he's, he says calculation is inconclusive. That's given in the Mahabharata where it says Tarko Pratishta Shrutayo Vivinam, that there's all kinds of Tarka or argument. But in the end, there's counter argument. So the very meaning of words disintegrate. That was given by a philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein, who pointed out that uh, the basis of all philosophy is words, and words are fallible in their meaning. So the idea is that faith goes beyond words. Faith ties in with experience. Um, we have faith, like we were talking about blind faith, uh, flying blind.
Mm.
We have this internal, I don't want to say belief because belief is not the same thing. I believe it's going to rain. I believe my football team will win. But faith is a deeper uh, sort of construction. It involves, uh, I want to say credibility, but it goes much deeper than that. Um, I consulted the internet on this. Uh, Now, here's the verse from Srila Rupa Goswami. He says, Adeo Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha Tapajana Kriya Tato Nartana Vritti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchis Tata Ata Saktis Tato Bhavas Tata Prema Pudanchati Sadhakana Mayam Premna Pradur Bhave Bhavet Krama. And this is Srila Prabhupada's translation found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He said, in the beginning there must be faith. Then one becomes interested in associating with pure devotees. Thereafter one is initiated by the spiritual master and executes the regulative principles under his orders. Thus one is freed from all unwanted habits and becomes firmly fixed in devotional service. Thereafter, one develops taste and attachment. This is the way of sadhana bhakti, the execution of devotional service according to the regulative principles. Gradually, emotions intensify, and finally, there's an awakening of love. This is the gradual development of love of Godhead for the devotee interested in Krishna consciousness. So we use this word faith, but it's hard to translate ideas from Sanskrit and Bengali into English because, say, the word faith, in Spanish, they say la fe, and they celebrate Columbus Day as the day upon which the faith came to America. When they say the faith, they mean Catholicism. But Catholicism is a very different strain of faith. It's not the same kind of thing. The idea that faith, when it's cultivated, should transform our lives. Uh, it's a very powerful kind of idea. And this is given also in Bhagavad Gita, where it says, Sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddha mayo yam purusho yo yach shraddha sa eva saha. In the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we were discussing this a little bit last week. Um, Krishna says, well, there's different kinds of faith according to the different modes of material nature. Sattvanu rupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddha mayo yam purusho yo yach shraddha sa eva saha. He says, O son of Bharat, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. So, if you look at this idea of faith and analyze it um, to its core or as deeply as possible, you can come up with a kind of taxonomy of faith. A taxonomy means you're breaking it down and showing different levels and layers. And the ultimate taxonomy of faith or Shraddha, apart from Rupa Goswami is dealing with the idea in a particular way, is given by Sanatan Goswami. So Srila Sri Ramanuja will point out there's some difference between Sanatan Goswami and Rupa Goswami, but here in a kind of general way, Rupa Goswami tells us, well, you begin with this intimation that you're connected with the infinite, and you follow that through, and you find saints, you find others who are committed to the same concept in the same way, and that will lead you to a teacher. And the teacher helps you develop a practice. And through that practice, gradually you give up things that are uh, against your faith. You give up the things, anartas, that are obstacles on the path. The word anartha is interesting because artha, it's like dhamma, artha, kama, moksha. Artha is wealth. So anartha would be poverty or the absence of wealth, the lack of something. But we normally think of anartha nivritti, as giving up unwanted attachments, bad habits like that. So Srila Goswami is describing the arc of faith in a more practical way, but uh, the taxonomy of faith, the breakdown of different levels of faith, is given by Sanatan Goswami in a book called Brihad Bhagavatamritam. And there he traces the movement of Gopa Kumar, who's shown in this photo here. In our book, The Loving Search for the Lost Servant, the idea is that Gopa Kumar, he explores different planets of faith from Bhuloka to Bhuvarloka to Svargaloka to Brahmaloka, Satyaloka, and above and beyond, Vaikuntha, the planets of Vishnu Loka, and then finally Ayodhya, Mathura, Vrindavan. So Gopakumar progresses through all these different planetary systems of faith. And sometimes I notice that there are institutes and movements within, especially with the Western Krishna Bhakti Society, who look at the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam and the cosmology there, and they decide that they want to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the veracity of the cosmology given in the fifth canto and demonstrate just how far Satyaloka is, or how far is Brahmaloka, or what position is occupied uh, in what constellation by Indraloka. But I think Srila Sridhar Maharaj has attested, and when Srila Prabhupada went to construct the Vedic planetarium, he said, consult with Srila Sridhar Maharaj. He knows about this. I believe he's really discussing a taxonomy of faith or planetary systems of faith. So that's what's given by Sanatan Goswami. He says there are these different divisions. You can call them planetary systems, but that's backed up by what Krishna himself is saying in Bhagavad Gita, Sat Vanurupa Sarvasya Shraddha Bhavati Bharata Shraddhamayo Yam Purusho Yo Yach Shraddha Sa Eva Saha. According to one's existence in the different modes of nature, it means according to how your faith is colored by Sattva, Raja, Tama, you'll develop a particular religion. Uh, and it's interesting that the word religion or dharma is often translated as prescribed duty. So you will develop a certain set of prescribed duties according to your faith, as that's colored by Sattva, Raja, and Tamas, the different modes of material nature. And so Srila Prabhupada comments, he says, everyone has a particular type of faith, regardless of what he is. But his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant, according to the nature he has acquired. Thus, according to his particular type of faith, one associates with certain persons. When one forgets his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and comes in contact with the material nature and conditional life, he generates his own position by association with the different varieties of material nature. The resultant artificial faith and existence are only material. I don't want to read all of this. Uh, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami continues. He says the word Shraddha or faith is very significant in this verse. Shraddha or faith originally comes out of the mode of goodness. One's faith may be in a god or some created god or some mental concoction. One's strong faith is supposed to be productive of works of material goodness, but in material conditional life, no works are completely purified. And he concludes, he points us in the direction of another shloka from Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatanantaratmana shradhavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. So there's different kinds of yoga. There's different kinds of religious practice or faith. Um, but Srila Prabhupada comments, the real principle of religious faith is situated in the mode of pure goodness. But because the heart is tainted, we find different types of religious principles. Thus, according to different types of faith, there are different types of worship. But Krishna says, of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, yogi nam api sarvesha, thinks of me within himself, mad gatenantaratmana, and renders transcendental loving service to me, shradhavan bhajate yomam. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. I laugh because when Sri Ramakrishna gave me the name Mahayogi, Bhaktivedanta Mahayogi, I asked him, well, what does this mean? He said, it means one whose opinion is that bhakti is the highest yoga. One whose rule, one whose vidan, is that bhakti is the highest yoga. And it's a very difficult name because as soon as I came back to the United States, they asked me, "Oh, what's your Mahayogi?" Oh, come on. You? Especially I was a little fat at the time. And the Indian friends who came to the temple, they would say, "You cannot be Mahayogi. No, no, this name is not. No, no." But I always thought, no, I am not the Mahayogi. The idea is I can tell you how it is that Yoginam api sarvesham, um, bhakti is the highest yoga. So this is the idea of faith that we're trying to understand. I think I had one more, just a moment. Uh, I thought I had one more, but the idea is also that it's not enough simply to have faith. You should be transformed by that faith. That faith should have a transformative power. Bhajana Kriya is a very, very interesting idea because normally we think, well, that means I sit down with a mridanga in front of the deities and chant some hymns. But in my ordinary behavior, I can be contemptuous, rude, angry, mean, cruel. Uh, I can defy all odds and break all the rules because I'm a Hare Krishna devotee and whatever I do is for Krishna. So I can lie, cheat, steal, and kill for Krishna. But as long as I have my drum in the temple and play a nice bhajan before the deities, all is well. Well, this is a superficial concept. Really, one who has deep faith should be transformed by that faith. And we should see some progress. So Srila Sridhar continues. He says, by Shraddha alone, we can attract the infinite. And when Shraddha develops a definite form, after progressing through bhav, ecstatic emotion, Shraddha becomes prem, divine love. Columbus set sail and after a long voyage finally arrived in America. He reached the land of good hope. In the same way with hope, Shraddha, faith, we may, after crossing Vaikuntha, arrive in the highest plane of the spiritual cosmos. Shraddha is our light in the darkness. Shraddha can guide us when we are travelers in the infinite. I have heard that this is the way to that place. That spirit will keep our hearts enlivened. The definition of Shraddha is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Faith is the firm conviction that by serving Krishna, all other purposes are automatically served. So that was the word I was searching for, not credibility, not uh, that we believe, but conviction, the absolute conviction that something is real, a firm conviction that by serving Krishna, all other purposes are automatically served. Srila Sri Ramar says, no risk, no gain. Greatest risk, greatest gain. Krishna reassures us, I am everywhere. There's no need to be afraid at all. Just realize that I am your friend. I am all in all, and you are mine. To believe this is your only fare for the journey to the land of faith. There's an old blues song like that. Uh, People get ready, there's a train coming. You don't need no ticket, you just get on board. All you need to ride, something like that. All you need to ride is just to have faith in the Lord, something like that. Your only ticket, your only fare for the journey is your faith. The absolute truth, the transcendental substance, who is the object of our inquiry through faith, is endowed with all power and all consciousness. He is kind, benevolent, and sweet. His power is infinitely higher than ours, and we are infinitely smaller than him. Our attitude should be that compared to him, we are insignificant. And after that, he goes on to talk about the relationship, guru disciple relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to point out because we've gone over this a number of different times. We read the entire Sri Guru and His Grace. We talked a lot about the guru disciple relationship uh, and the importance of finding a qualified guru, who is guru and who is not. But in the end, it's down to us. And there's a couple of things that are interesting about that. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha shloka. A lot of people look at that and think, well, okay, this is a recipe. First, I go out and buy some faith. How do I do that? Okay. Now I got faith. I need to practice some bhajan, kriya, get in with the sadhus. Okay, I did that. So what's next on the list? This is a recipe. You do this, you do this, you do this, you get that. Uh, this is a recipe for what? Krishna prem. Okay, so now I want some Krishna prem. Hold on. It's not so fast. See, it may not be yours in a few seconds or a few minutes. Many devotees, especially in the Western world, I don't know, also in the Eastern world, right? We always blame the Western devotees, but of course, hashish was invented in India or Pakistan, Afghanistan, Lebanon, the Middle East. They knew about that. Uh, when I was in Navadvip, someone offered me, there was this drink that you could have called bang that was made with fermented date juice and hashish or something. Of course, I declined, but um, this sort of idea is not unknown in the East. And, many devotees, they took to LSD, hashish, marijuana, thinking, well, perhaps I am so saturated by ego that I need to unlock some kind of higher consciousness. I'm not saying that this drug will give me prema, but what I am saying is my search for a higher thing is blocked by my own ego. And if I can just dissolve the ego, then I could get to that higher place. If it's true that I'm overcome with calculation, I have to get beyond calculation. So LSD, hashish, this made a lot of sense to devotees back in the 1960s and back in the 1970s, and even in the 80s, and so on. I personally uh, knew someone who was an advocate of this. I don't want to mention names. You probably know who I'm talking about. He even had some disciples. And the there was this idea going around, for example, that what is the purpose of brahmacharya? The idea of brahmacharya is by avoiding spilling your semen. Uh, the great yogis, by sitting in the lotus position and meditating on the tip of their nose, force the active reproductive fluids up their spine into their brain. And when they get a drop of that on their brain, they open the head chakra and the divine light pours out. And in this way, they become free from ego. Well, there was a guru in the ancient, yeah, there in the ancient Krishna movement, who advocated this, saying, well, LSD is a ticket to higher consciousness in the same way, better living through chemistry. What is concentrated semen that's been forced through the spinal column, but a particular kind of chemical combination? What if we can get that through a drop of LSD? And then we're on our way. Um, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, when he heard this, of course, he laughed. He said, no, no amount of material substance can produce spiritual consciousness. You can't rely on a material chemical to give you divine enlightenment. This is foolishness. You're only trying to cheat yourself. Whatever you can get from that, you'll have to pay back later with the karmic reaction. Uh, and yet, we are contaminated by this technological concept that if we follow a procedure, then we'll get a result. And so it's a question of working out what is the formula, what is the procedure. And Rupa Goswami is giving us the formula here. Ada Shraddha Tato Sadhu Sangha. There's the formula. You do this, you do this, you do that. Look in the uh, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami, and you see, well, there's 64 processes of devotional service. So when you get to Bhajana Kriya, you just work those 64 processes, and bang, bingo, you're on to Krishna praying. But the interesting thing is, this is not necessarily a step-by-step formula or recipe, but something that you're constantly cycling through. So you discover faith and you try to progress by associating with saints. And then you discover maybe a new wrinkle, a new avenue, a new path, or a better approach, a higher saint, a better teacher. Or maybe there's some problem and you have to take two steps back and then three steps forward. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained this is a crooked process. Krishna moves in a crooked way. It's not step by step ABC formula. My computer crashed recently. I'm still out 700 gigabytes of data. I don't know how I'm going to recover, but I got my system working again. I plugged in an SSD drive, and they're super fast. But in order to make it work, I had to open another computer and using AI, go through step by step, do this, follow this. Okay, turn it off, turn it on, reinstall that. So in technology, there's a step by step approach, an exercise maybe. But in faith, it's not such an easy thing. The word in Bengali for easy is sahaj. So we're not easyists. We're not sahajas. We're not thinking that if you do this and that, you'll get instant Krishna prema. So I'm just saying it's interesting to reflect on faith and try to understand how do we progress in our faith. Uh, so there's my morning talk. I don't know if it, Hare Krishna. I don't know if that's helpful to anybody.
Thank you.
There's an interesting point. You mentioned Sri Guru's grace again, which we discussed recently. Sri Guru Maharaj said he didn't like the idea of blind faith, and he told us to keep one eye on him. He said, "Don't have blind faith in me. Examine me. Watch me." Um,
Yeah.
so, like, I know there's a point where you do like it's strange, at least in the Vaishnav idea. Um, he didn't like the idea of blind faith directly regarding his disciples and himself.
Yeah, there's a time for blind faith, I
Yeah,
think.
of course.
You
Yeah.
know, when you're trying to learn something and you have faith in the teacher, you're trying to learn how to ride a motorcycle, and your teacher says, "Okay, now don't do this, do this." You listen. If you're going to learn to fly an airplane, right? You have blind faith in your teacher. He says, "Don't press that red button." And then, like years later, you discover the red button is a cigarette lighter.
Oh,
And he was just having me on. But in the beginning, you have to have blind faith. Your dance teacher will tell you, don't dance like this, you'll hurt a muscle. But later, when you're a kind of a veteran or more experienced in whatever it is you were learning, then you can, modify a rule. You can even break a rule, you know?
Sure. I mean, what's the rope stick? It's a rope. It's a stick. It's a rope. It's a stick. Ah.
Yeah. Basic training in the Marines, you know, your Marine sergeant will tell you you're going over to fight the enemy. Now, if you don't do this, you will get killed. And so you believe him. Later, when you're in the field with, the sergeant and other guys, they tell you, come on, man, that isn't it at all. And after a while, you have your experience. But what is faith? Where does it come from? How do we get it? How can we develop it? Um, I have an idea, and that's maybe why I'm the guy giving the talk, you know. But my idea may not be that much better than the ideas of so many other great souls who were on the path, you know. From a time I was a child, I knew there was a higher force, put it that way. Uh, I had child epilepsy, right? And so just as maybe, you know, it's weird that so many people who took LSD, mescaline, hashish, these things, they later became, you know, crazy, mad prophets who believed in God. But that might have been their tendency before they did that. So, when you have epilepsy, something opens up in your brain. Maybe it's the third eye. Maybe it's the divine light. Maybe you're just crazy. But there's something there. Took me to, you know, a Catholic monastery in the desert when I was 10 years old, where I heard from a Chinese Buddhist Catholic priest who told me about how to interpret the Bible. I said, how is it possible that all these different generations of human beings came from Adam and Eve? You want me to believe that? Isn't that incest? He said, well, the Bible never says there's only one Adam and there's only one Eve. I went, wow, really? I'm still thinking about that. That's pretty good. What about the earth was created in 7 days? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us how long a day is. Oh, and I went from that to the Hare Krishnas and, chant Hare Krishna and stay high forever and Srila Prabhupada and transcendental sound. But then I'm reading this interesting book right now. It's called Orange Sunshine. It's about this group in Laguna Beach called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And these were like truck drivers and plumbers and carpenters who took LSD and discovered God and then started studying Buddha and Vivekananda and Ram Krishna. Of course, they were all bogus, but there was something there. Later on, when I joined the Laguna Beach Temple, our purpose at the Laguna Beach Temple was to get rid of the devotees there who had turned into hashish dealers, you know. I didn't know that though. That was revealed to me like 30 years later. I knew they were doing something, but I didn't really know what it was. I just knew there were this group of people who we don't associate with them and they don't come around anymore. Uh, and I'm just saying, at some point, the mission as it was constituted under Srila Prabhupada, it suffered some sort of decay, corruption, if you like. And we went to Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So I've found my faith challenged by the materialism of even people who call themselves devotees. And then I rediscovered my faith with Srila Sridhar Maharaj and his associates, Govinda Maharaj. It amazes me how transparent the divine current flowed from Srila Sridhar Maharaj to Govinda Maharaj. Those three great Vaishnava souls, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami, Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj, they gave us everything. Uh, and I'm very fortunate that I had their association. And I'm very fortunate to have your association. So I may have a little bit of faith, but uh, I don't know. Help me, pray for my soul. uh, Send your vibrations of Shraddha in my general direction over the electronic currents of the internet. There used to be this guy on TV who would reach out his hand like that. He would say, reach out your hand and touch the screen. I don't know. But Meenakshi Sundaram is looking at me, and I think it's time for me to stop.
No, I just wanted to just to have one question. I'm just wanted to clarify this point. When Srila Guru Maharaj is talking about the ocean of faith, right? And what does that ocean of faith mean? It's just like faith, it means it can get deeper and deeper. Is that how we, because we understand ocean of material existence, it's like ocean, that's also it says like ocean of material existence. It just but how does that term ocean of faith, what does it signify? What just wanted to know.
This is a really good question, Shivasini. Um, any question like this, you know, involves different approaches. So you can take it philosophically, and you can try to approach that through reason and discover, okay, well, yeah, what is the origin of faith? Where does that come from? If faith is a kind of knowing, which we think it is. Faith is a way of knowing the soul. Faith is a way of knowing God, right? Then you get into questions of what we call epistemology, right? Where does knowledge come from? It becomes an epistemological question, right? And then any question of philosophy involves reasoning, and you get back to language. So Wittgenstein would say, well, it's all just words, words, words. You can't prove anything, can't understand anything with words, right? On the other side, it's it's an ontological question. It's a question of being. We have our being as Atma. God has his being as Paramatma. There's definitely a relationship. Ramanujacharya, with his Vishishtadvaitavad, he says, what is the relationship? Well, it's like the sun and sunbeam, sun particles. Sun particles are energy, but they're not the same exact energy as the sun itself, which is far more intense. It's a source. So there's a relationship between the infinite and the infinitesimal on an ontological level. It's a question of being. And that kind of understanding can be approached from within. If I am a living being and God is a super living being, I can sense his presence. And that kind of sensing we could call faith. Now, you could approach this from both uh, paths at the same time and say, okay, well, I will try to use reason and philosophy to understand something rationally in a kind of a general way. But then I also have this sense, this being sense, or my religious experience, which will help me approach it more in an ontological way. And using those two, uh, I develop a kind of a metaphysical sense of what faith uh, might be. But the other sort of prong of or fork is the association of saints. I'm not alone. You see, I go, well, all right, here's the conclusion I've come to. But there are others. I'm not alone. They have the same kind of idea, even though maybe, you know, in the society in which I live, this kind of point of view is not highly prized. In my society, people appreciate calculation and reason more. But I know other people who have a similar faith. So that's another, you know, aspect. And then finally, well, then furthermore, there's also the Shastra, scripture. So you see, I'm not the first one to explore the idea of God, neither rationally nor you know, ontologically. I'm not the first one to think about this or to feel it. And you look at history and you see, well, there's Thomas Aquinas who wrote, you know, 1,000-page treatise called Summa Theologica, where what he's trying to do is justify the ways of God to man and give us a reasonable explanation for faith. Uh, and so his work is very powerful and has inspired, I don't know, 1,000 years of uh, church doctrine in the Catholic Church. Uh, Go back to India. There's the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, which are even thousands of years distant, taking up more than a rational basis for creed, taking up the ontological basis. You sit at the feet of the master, Upanishad, that's what it means. So there's also the guru, the teacher, who embodies faith. So we have these three aspects of uh, development in faith to uh, help us get to the core or the origin, as you said, of what faith might be and to help us in our development. And that's about as good as I get on that. That's about as far as I can go. I can read, I can read, you know, Thomas Aquinas, and I'm not completely satisfied him because he doesn't get into Atma. And I can read the commentators on the Vedas, and I like them too, the Vedanta. You know, even oh, Sri Aurobindo, you know, Ram Krishna Vivekananda, they're kind of qualified as rascals because uh, they have a different point of view. But the Advaiti Vedanta people, they have a deep appreciation for the nature of infinite spiritual reality.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I appreciate that, but, you know, there's Brahma, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. We feel that if it's true that there's the infinitesimal jiva everywhere, permeating the entire universe and the universe beyond this one and the one beyond that. You know, consciousness is everywhere. You cannot deny that. You can try. You can say, well, I don't really perceive consciousness here, but your perception is limited. Consciousness is everywhere. So if consciousness is everywhere, great. You know, you can merge into that. Uh, the clear white light, the absence of ego. It's very appealing. But there's also God within. God, the Supreme Personality, you know, as Paramatma, permeates everything. According to our view, you know, Bhagavatam, Brahmeti Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. The first canto of Bhagavatam says, the seers of the truth, Vedanti Tattva Vidas Tattvam. The seers of the truth, the Vedanti, they can see what's going on, and they say uh, it's Brahman, right? Eternal consciousness everywhere. Paramatma, the God within, and Bhagavan, the supreme personality of God. If you have personality, we think the human form, it's the best form. A human personality, it's above all the animals. Why would there not be a higher gradation? Why would there not? Why would God if he's infinite, not enjoy the quality of personality. We like that idea. So Brahman Parmeti, you know, Bhagavani Dishabdite. Uh, so all these different saints, from Thomas Aquinas to Rudolf Otto to, Shankaracharya, they're pretty good. But Ramanujacharya, he's better. He's more powerful. His commentary on Bhagavad Gita. Uh, and then there's Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya tries to separate it all. He says, well, the soul is not God. God is not soul. It's all very different. Um, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he comes along and says, okay, well, you can't understand what a particle is. Maybe it's a field. Maybe it's a wave of energy. So even at the basic level, there's an achintya beta beta tattva aspect to everything in the physical world down to the, subatomic level. A wave is a particle. Light is matter. Matter is light. So there is some level upon which it's difficult to construe a distinction between spirit and matter. The mind-body problem. Where exactly is the mind? Where exactly is the soul? Where does the soul end and matter begin? In a plant, in a microbe, is a virus a living entity? Uh, it's a subtle question. The living spirit, the Atma, is divine. There's no question about it. There's something of divinity in all of us. But how divine? Is it as divine as the Supreme Personality of Godhead? No, there's a distinction to be made there, but it's not our position, given the limits of rational thought, to work out that kind of a distinction. So I don't know. I lost my train of thought. But oh,
My
yeah,
goodness.
I was talking about theologians, right? So there's, you know, all of them are struggling to try to communicate their experience of reality. And so many of them are communicating some kind of experience about divine reality that, we can take it that they're not all wandering in the dark, that there's some light getting through the cracks of uh, Maya, getting through the cracks. Leonard Cohen has a song about that's where the light gets through. You know, there's some light coming through the darkness. We're not really flying blind. We've been given instruments. Srila Sridhar gives the example of a compass. He says, when you're lost at sea, you have your compass. So we've been given books like this, speeches, talks, practices that we can do, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. You're not lost. And that gives me some comfort. I love doing this Sunday talk here because I feel that, well, maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I'm not alone. There's millions of people watching this video right now who will testify to the fact that we're not alone. So again, if you're out there in Ukraine or you're out there in Africa somewhere, we've had many different participants in this talk, and the one we did on the Prapana Jivanamritam and the Bhagavad Gita, from Israel to Russia to Ukraine to France, Germany, Spain, England, Ireland, of course, Mexico, the United States.
Hello,
There she is. Viva Mexico.
Dhanavad to all.
Hare
I
Krishna. There she is. It's Tapanandini. Thank you for joining us. It's good to see you. So if you're out there,
joined, I
yeah,
joined at the beginning, and I am very glad that I hear this talking. It's very beautiful, and I'm very thankful that you keep preaching. I think you are the best preacher we have in the world right now. I think you are the most sincere, and we appreciate it very, very, very much. Yay, Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. I
Yeah,
was thinking
thank you.
while you talk about faith, I thought that Jesus, you mentioned Jesus, and what Jesus says, if you have faith, you can say the mountain to move, and it will move. But we have to be really given to the faith. Faith has personality, so we have to please faith. No energy in this world is impersonal. Everything is personal. And as we have to get rid of our prejudices, prejuicios, Mahayogi, I don't know how you say it. We have to
Prejudice,
get rid of that because we
prejudice.
think we put our own limits. And I think the limits that we put on are our real obstacles. Well, I
Hallelujah.
love you, every one of you very much, and I wish you the best. Sorry, Mahayogi, you have the last word, so let me know.
Yeah,
Haribol, Haribol.
that's why I love this. I get the last word, you know.
Yes.
That's why I like teaching too, because I get the last word, you know. So don't forget your homework, you know.
I
Yeah.
want.
Well,
Well, Maharaj, may I add something, please?
oh, you want the last word? Go ahead.
No, I want the second last word. I'm
Okay.
Irish after all. No.
All right.
Faith, it's Bhakti Devi. Faith is Bhakti Devi. And
That's good. Yeah,
she comes and goes of her own will. We
that's
cannot
very good.
control it in any way. We aspire for it, for her blessing, for her mercy, but we have no hold on her lotus feet. It's purely mercy at the end of the day. And can
That's very good. Yeah.
the guru can give us that. He can touch us with that. He can bless us. He can, like we saw with Srila Govinda Maharaj, like Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada gave his disciples, he gave them faith.
Right. That's very nice what
So
Tapanandini was saying, that she said that faith has a personality. And I immediately thought, oh yeah. And then Pranashish is coming in with Bhakti Devi, of course, you know. But it's hard to speak spontaneously and read and remember
Well,
everything. That's why we have the Sangha. So thank
I
you.
want to
Yeah.
say one last word, not the last
Oh,
word, but one
oh,
last word.
the,
It is that only love can control the absolute. And love means acceptance of the unqualified and of the whatever situation one soul is in. If we are all trying, we are not perfect. We are just trying to find the way to Krishna. Well,
that's
now you have the
beautiful.
last word,
That's
Mahayogi.
beautiful. Well, I'll take the last word. And as the giver of the last word, or the taker of the last word, uh, I just want to say, we do so many things in Sanskrit. We go Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhans. We do that. But I think the idea of Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai is a very beautiful one. So I want to reach out to those who are listening and paying attention to this broadcast or Comcast or Zoom call out there in YouTube video land. And if you're out there listening to this, um, send some Shraddha our way, send some faith our way, send some Bhakti Devi our way. It said, Bhakti Sanjataya Bhaktya. Bhakti creates bhakti. Love generates love. And there's so much hate in the world. Why not generate a little love. So if you're out there in the world of YouTube listening to this broadcast that has been kindly recorded by Subhasini Meenakshi Sundaram, send some bhakti, faith, mercy, and love to Teresa Lorette Mola, uh, Francis Mahoney Pranashish, uh, Alex, Adwai Krishna Prabhu, Hari Priya, and yours truly, the very fallen and out of his mind, Mahayogi. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much. And Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Adios to all of you.
Jai Mahayogi Thakur ki Jai.
Dandavas to all.
Dandavad, Dandavad.
Tulsi
Dandavas,
Devi ki
dandavas.
jai.
Right.
Dandavas. Subhasini, thank you very much for this opportunity of hearing Mahayogi. Haribol.
Thank you. Thank you. I just